This little girl was kidnapped by this man who said that he was the chosen one by God and God wanted them to get married. If you haven't already heard of the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart, then just buckle up, settle down, because this is going to be a wild one. Elizabeth Smart was only 14 years old when she was kidnapped. Up until then, she was living a really great life. She had a great family. She lived in a nice big house in Salt Lake City, Utah. Her family was Mormon, and religion was really important to her family and to Elizabeth. It was June 5th, 2002. Elizabeth and her younger sister, 9-year-old Mary Catherine, went to bed. The two of them shared a bedroom, and in the middle of the night, Elizabeth woke up to a strange man standing over her with a sharp weapon to her neck, and he told her, "Get out of bed, come with me, don't make a sound, or I will kill your entire family." First, Elizabeth thinks that this is a dream, but she quickly realized that this is actually a living nightmare. She sees her little sister, Mary Catherine, in the bed next to her. She doesn't want to, scare her, have her whole family killed. So she complied with the man, and he walked her out of her front door. The man guides Elizabeth to walk up a nearby mountain where he already had a campsite waiting for her. And at this point, Elizabeth just tells him, "Please just kill me and get this over with." But he just gave her this really weird smile and said, "I'm not going to kill you yet." And it was around this point that Elizabeth realizes that she knows this man. She recognizes the man who has just kidnapped her. This man was Brian Mitchell, a total Jesus wannabe. He wore long white robes. He had long hair, long beard. He thought that he was a prophet, the chosen one by God, and that he was speaking to God. 7 months before Brian kidnapped Elizabeth, her mom, and her younger sister were out shopping, and Brian came over to them asking them for some money. Not only did Elizabeth's mom give Brian money that day, but her parents also offered to give him a job and have him do some odd jobs around their house. I mean, how horrible, right? Her parents try to help out this man who's down on his luck, and he repays them by kidnapping their daughter. Well, back at their house, Elizabeth's younger sister, Mary Catherine, who she shared that bedroom with, turns out she was awake the entire time her sister was being kidnapped. So she runs to her parents' room to tell them what happened. They're frantic, obviously. They're searching the entire house. And that's when they found that the window in the kitchen, the screen had been cut. And that's how Brian got into their house. The police come, but they don't even treat it like a crime scene. They just let people walk all over the entire scene, just contaminating the entire thing. They question the little sister, and she tries to tell them everything that she can remember, but she also tells them that she knows the man's voice. She recognized the voice, but she couldn't remember where she had heard it from. Meanwhile, Brian has just made Elizabeth hike up this entire mountain. She's exhausted, to where he has a campsite waiting for her, and where his wife was also waiting for him and Elizabeth. Yes, this man is married to a woman who's just as messed up as he is. Her name is Wanda. She's also wearing a long robe. She has a headdress on. She makes Elizabeth undress in front of her and then put on one of the robes. Poor Elizabeth is just sitting on the ground and she's crying. Brian comes up to her and then performs some weird marriage ritual on her and then tells her that she is now his wife. This is all part of God's plan, and Elizabeth is the first of many wives he plans on kidnapping, essentially, before he essayed her for the first time. Brian then tied Elizabeth to a tree on a 20-foot leash, and he would keep her like that for weeks and weeks, barely feeding her or giving her any water. And the entire time that she's being held captive by these total freaks, his wife, Wanda, is jealous about how much attention Elizabeth is getting. Like, she's jealous of this 14-year-old girl. Like, she wants to be there being held captive and being essayed by your husband. And after being kidnapped by these sick individuals for 49 days, Brian tells Elizabeth that he plans on kidnapping her 14-year-old cousin named Olivia and also making her his wife. Brian attempted to break into Olivia's house, but was luckily stopped by Olivia's mother, who literally caught him cutting the screen of the window the exact same way he broke into Elizabeth's house. Brian did get away, and the families definitely believed that this was connected, but the police refused to believe that this had anything to do with Elizabeth's disappearance. After a few months of having Elizabeth in captivity, Brian and Wanda would bring her into town with them, the same city where they kidnapped her from, to help them beg for money as long as she was completely disguised. They even brought Elizabeth to a house party, which is super random, where this photo was taken of her. Even though Elizabeth was completely covered up except for her eyes when she went into town, there were times where she would be recognized because this case was huge and everyone knew who Elizabeth was and about her kidnapping. Like one time where they brought her to a library and the police were called because they said that Elizabeth Smart was here with these people in these robes, but the police only spoke to them for a couple minutes before leaving, and they never even told her parents about this potential sighting. At this point, it has been months since Elizabeth went missing, and the police are still looking for leads or suspects. They start looking at people that the family had hired to do work around the house, since they hired so many different people to do jobs, and those people will be familiar with like the layout and the family schedule. That's when the investigators first thought of Brian as a potential suspect because he had a criminal past. But instead of looking for Brian to try and question him, the police became fixated on one suspect, a local handyman named Richard Reese. They had no evidence against this man, Richard, but they were convinced that he was guilty. They would interrogate him intensely. They ran this man's name through the mud up until the day he died of a brain hemorrhage. And the police were so convinced that Richard was guilty of not only kidnapping but killing Elizabeth, even though they had no body and no evidence that she was dead, that they actually tried to close the case when Richard died. Luckily, they didn't, and then one night, Elizabeth's little sister, Mary Catherine, was just lying in bed, and then it just comes to her. She remembered how she recognized the man's voice that had kidnapped her sister. It just came to her with no explanation. She runs, she tells her parents that it was Brian Mitchell that kidnapped her sister, the homeless man that they gave $5 to that came and worked on their house at one time. And I do not know what's up with the cops in this case, but at first they literally refused to release Brian's name and photo to the public to keep an eye out for this guy. He might have a connection to Elizabeth Smart's disappearance. But once they finally did release it, Elizabeth Smart was found 9 months after she had been kidnapped. 2 separate calls came into 911 that Brian Mitchell was seen with a young girl at Walmart. They surrounded this Walmart. Brian had Elizabeth wearing this really terrible disguise, I'm not gonna lie. They had her in sunglasses and a really cheap wig. Brian and Wanda were arrested and Elizabeth could finally go back and be with her family. Wanda pled guilty but was released after serving only 9 years, you guys. She's out free right now, and last I heard she's actually living down the street from an elementary school. But Brian's trial took 8 years to start because he kept trying to like play up the fact that he was crazy, and they could not determine for the longest time if he was even competent to stand trial. But when he did finally go to trial, Elizabeth, because she's so brave and so strong, she actually testified against him. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. To this day, Elizabeth Smart is seen as such an inspiration to so many people. I love these cases of survival. I love being able to share these cases with you guys. Elizabeth Smart is also a huge advocate for survivors of kidnapping and SA, and today you will be happy to know that she is very happy, and she's also a wife and a mother. It felt really nice to tell you guys a case with a happy ending today. We don't get a lot of those in true crime. Thank you guys so much for listening to Elizabeth Smart's story. Let me know all your guys' thoughts in the comments, and while you're there, please tell me what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow. The teenager that threw her baby away in the hospital trash can. I'm sure at this point most of you guys have heard of Alexi Trevizo, or at least have seen clips of her on social media. But there are some pretty recent updates to this case that I'm sure will disgust you just as much as they disgusted me. Before 2023, Alexi Trevizo was like any other teenage girl. She was a good girl. She never really got in any trouble. She had a high GPA. She already had gotten accepted into the New Mexico State University. She had a lot of friends. She had a long-term boyfriend. She had been dating for well over 2 years. And Alexi was a cheerleader. On January 27th, 2023, Alexi had been in pain for almost 24 hours straight. Alexi had gotten sick at cheer practice that day, and when she went home, she still had this severe back pain and stomach pain, so her mother took her to the emergency room. I don't know if it's the same thing for men, but when women go to the hospital or the doctor, it's pretty standard procedure to be given a UA test. Well, this test came back that Alexi was pregnant. Alexi and her mother both look shocked when they're told that Alexi is pregnant, but Alexi is telling the hospital staff that that is actually impossible because she had never even done the deed before. Having a false pregnancy test is extremely rare, but it is possible, so the hospital staff gave Alexi a blood test just to be sure. While waiting for the results of the blood test, Alexi is seen on the hospital surveillance footage literally sprinting to the bathroom. Alexi's mother follows her to the bathroom. She's knocking on the door like, "Hey honey, are you okay?" And Alexi just tells her, "I'm fine mom, I'll be out soon." But the hospital staff is extremely concerned for Alexi. She's been in the bathroom for a very long time at this point. They hear a lot of weird noises coming from the bathroom. They hear the toilet being flushed over and over and over again. They hear the water running, and they hear Alexi grabbing a bunch of paper towels from the paper towel dispenser. Hospital staff is on the other side of the door, and they're asking Alexi if she's okay, if she needs help, and she's not answering them. So they tell Alexi that they're going to be going and getting a key, and they're going to be unlocking that bathroom door and coming in because they're concerned for her. Well, when Alexi hears that the hospital staff is going to be unlocking the door and coming in, she opens the door. 19-year-old Lexi just walks calmly back to her hospital bed like nothing happened. The hospital staff go into the bathroom and there is blood everywhere, and that's when they found the little body of a baby that had been stuffed at the bottom of the trash can in a trash bag. A little full-term baby boy just stuffed in a trash bag, and he was sadly already gone. So the police were called, and that's where the body cam footage that has been spread on social media comes into play.
We discovered a dead baby in the bathroom. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. I came out and I didn't know what to do.
Lexi, I told you about this.
But it
I just asked you. You need to tell me the truth.
it was not crying or nothing.
What did you do to it?
Okay, stop right here.
Lexi was only 19 years old. She was a senior in high school. She told them that the baby was born stillborn and it did not cry. She still had to be seen medically because she has just given birth before she was released from the hospital while they awaited to see what came of the baby's autopsy. And it was determined that his cause of death was asphyxiation from being put in that trash bag and not being able to breathe. And then on May 10th, a little over 4 months later, the police came to Alexi's house to arrest her. And Alexi's mother is pissed. She's arguing with the police officers. She does not want them going inside, and she definitely does not want them arresting her daughter. And they're telling her, "We are here to arrest your daughter for homicide and tampering with evidence charges." And her mom looks so upset, and she's so concerned about the tampering with evidence charge.
Homicide. Open count of homicide. And tampering with evidence.
Tampering with evidence?
Yes.
At the hospital?
So, can we see her now?
She was released 6 days later, awaiting trial on a $100,000 bond, and after she was released, she hung out with friends and she went to prom. Her trial was meant to start this month, actually in only a couple days, but it was delayed, and hopefully it's going to start in October. Alexi's lawyer not only claims that the baby was born stillborn, but that Alexi actually had no idea that she was pregnant, and get this, her lawyer also claims that this is all the hospital's fault and that the hospital failed Alexi and her baby. And Alexi and her lawyer actually extremely recently sued the hospital for the wrongful death of her baby because Alexi should have never been able to go into the bathroom in the first place. That's what they're saying. This is very confusing to me personally because the hospital staff was trying to get into the bathroom to help her for over 20 minutes. But let me know what you guys think. Personally, I do not think that this lawsuit is going to go anywhere, and this was just like some kind of defense strategy that they came up with. This lawsuit is even more disgusting because the hospital staff that day is extremely traumatized because of this. These are people that went into the medical field and dedicated their lives to save lives, and they were never even given a chance to save Alexi's baby. Hospitals are also a safe haven place, if you did not know this, where mothers can surrender their babies, no questions asked. So Alexi's decisions that day, to me personally, seem like she just didn't want anyone to know that she was pregnant, she had a baby, and yeah, she just didn't want anyone finding out. How's that working out for you, Alexi? I actually have a really hard time that no one knew that Alexi was pregnant. She claims that she didn't know. Her boyfriend claims that she did not know. Her friends, her teachers, her mom all claim that they did not know that she was pregnant, but I've seen photos of her before she gave birth and she looks pregnant. Definitely let me know all your thoughts on this case, and also let me know what you think is going to happen in the trial. Apparently they have a lot of evidence that will prove that she did know she was pregnant, so let me know all your thoughts on that in the comments. And while you're there, please tell me what case you'd want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow. This might be the most intriguing true crime case for me personally, and one that I think you guys are going to find extremely interesting. If you're not already familiar with the staircase case of Michael and Kathleen Peterson, sit down and relax, or get up and clean your room because we're going to be here for a while. Michael and Kathleen Peterson are the two people that we are going to be discussing today, and they were said to have the perfect marriage. They were soulmates. They lived in this big, beautiful house. They were really living this fairy tale life until December 9th, 2001, around 2:40 a.m., Michael Peterson called 911 to report that he found his wife Kathleen lying at the bottom of their staircase. Michael is absolutely frantic on the 911 call. He's begging them, please get here soon. He's saying that his wife had fallen down the staircase and she was unconscious. Oddly enough, on the 911 call, Michael never mentions the amount of blood that is at the scene, which is the first thing that the first responders noticed when they got there. And tragically, by the time that the first responders did get there, Kathleen was already gone. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it for you guys. The amount of blood that was at this scene, it was an insanely large amount of blood for a woman just simply falling down the staircase. And there is photos online, there's crime scene photos. Typically, I tell you guys not to look at crime scene photos, but if you guys want to, I do think it's important to understand the gravity of the amount of blood that was at this scene. It was said that there was over 10,000 blood splatters on the staircase and on the walls. The police on the scene were really suspicious of Michael immediately for more reasons than one. For one thing, Michael's story of events that night is kind of unbelievable. He says that him and his wife Kathleen sat down and they watched a movie, and the movie ended around 11 p.m. The two of them went outside to share some wine by the pool, and then sometime around midnight or before midnight, Kathleen went inside. And then Michael stayed outside for about 2 or 3 hours alone. But it was December and it was nighttime and he was only wearing a t-shirt and shorts, which is, I don't know, kind of weird to be sitting outside for 2 to 3 hours in the cold in just a t-shirt, but I digress. He then says that he went inside around 2:30, 2:40 in the morning where he found his wife lying at the bottom of the staircase before calling 911. It's an odd timeline for sure, but even more suspicious was the blood. Yes, there was an abnormally large amount of blood at this scene for someone who has just fallen down the stairs. But there was also blood found inside of Michael's shorts that he was wearing. A bloody footprint was also found on Kathleen's sweatpants that matched one of Michael's shoes, but he says that he was barefoot for the entire night. And probably the second most suspicious piece of evidence in this case is after the police did a luminol test. I'm sure you guys know what luminol is, but if you don't, it's a chemical that will show where blood has been, even if someone attempts to clean it up. The test showed that someone tracked bloody footprints throughout the house, into the kitchen, to the sink, to the washing machine, and then attempted to clean it up. And I say that this is only the second most suspicious thing because I'm going to share with you guys the most suspicious thing ever in just a minute. But first, let's talk about Kathleen's autopsy. The autopsy showed that Kathleen had 7 deep lacerations to her head. And the medical examiner said that this was likely caused by being hit over the head repeatedly by an object. Also, there was cartilage in Kathleen's neck that was fractured, likely by strangulation. And with this, Kathleen's cause of death was determined to be a homicide. And if you're not already extremely suspicious of Kathleen's husband, Michael, what if I told you this was not the first time a woman close to Michael was found dead at the bottom of a staircase? Years before Michael and Kathleen met and got married, he was living in Germany with his first wife, and the two of them had a very close friend, a single mother named Elizabeth Ratliff. The last time that Elizabeth was ever seen alive, she had dinner at Michael's house, and then after dinner, Michael walked Elizabeth home. Later that night, Michael was seen by Elizabeth's neighbor running away from Elizabeth's house. And the very next morning, Elizabeth was found dead, lying at the bottom of her staircase, in an eerily similar way to the way that Kathleen was found. Blood everywhere and deep lacerations to the back of her head. And after Elizabeth died, Michael actually adopted Elizabeth's 2 daughters, left his wife, and then took Elizabeth's 2 daughters and moved back to the United States, which is kind of weird. At first, Elizabeth's death was ruled as an accident, and Michael never mentioned this when his wife was found dead the exact same way. I'm assuming since it happened in Germany, in another country, he was hoping that no one would ever find out. It actually wasn't until Elizabeth's sister heard the news that Michael's wife died the exact same way that her sister did, and he was the last one to see both of them alive. So she alerted the authorities, and they actually exhumed Elizabeth's body to do an autopsy, and it was determined that Elizabeth's cause of death was not an accident. It was actually a homicide. So things are not looking good for Michael Peterson, and he was arrested for the murder of his wife, Kathleen. During the trial, the defense's story was that Kathleen had fallen while walking up the stairs, but then she fell back, hit her head, she tried to get up, slipped on her own blood, so she fell backwards again, she tried to get up, then she fell again, and she did that until she had the 7 head wounds. It sounds far-fetched, especially since if you fall walking up the stairs, your instinct is to fall forward and like catch yourself. But they say that this is possible because Kathleen was drunk, you know, that they were sharing wine that night. But Kathleen actually had so little alcohol in her system that she would have passed a breathalyzer test and would have still been able to legally drive. And I'm sure you're wondering if there's a motive here. Why would Michael want to kill his wife, his soulmate? The prosecution actually had 2 possible motives. The one being financial. Michael and Kathleen were in debt, a lot of debt actually, upwards of $140,000 in debt. And Kathleen had a life insurance policy of nearly $2 million. But there's also another possible motive. Michael was having an affair with a man, actually. On Michael's computer, he had over 2,000 images of men. He had also been speaking online to a young male escort for about 4 months before Kathleen died, with plans of meeting up in person to pay for this escort's services. And the night that Kathleen died, she used Michael's computer, which she never did, but she had some work to do and she accidentally left her computer at the office. The prosecution's theory was that Kathleen found this, she confronted her husband, and Michael snapped. He was known to have a quick temper, and since he possibly had gotten away with murder once before, he would know exactly what to do. The prosecution even had a potential murder weapon. Well, kind of. Kathleen's injuries to her head lined up with a fireplace blowpoke, and Kathleen and Michael did have a custom-made, a really, really nice blowpoke that they had gotten from a gift from Kathleen's sister. And the night that Kathleen died, the blowpoke was missing, nowhere to be found. Ultimately, the jury did find Michael Peterson guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but this case does not end here. Michael has never been charged in the death of Elizabeth Ratliff, and her 2 daughters have stuck by their adoptive father Michael and have believed in his innocence to this day. And Michael, to this day, has maintained his innocence, and he spent 8 years in prison for killing his wife until it was determined that Michael did not get a fair trial, and a judge awarded Michael a brand new trial. But instead of doing the entire trial again, Michael was given a plea deal, an Alford plea, which we've talked about Alford pleas before. It's a super rare kind of plea deal where you can plead guilty to something while still maintaining your innocence. And that's what Michael did. And then after taking this plea deal, Michael was released on time served. So today, Michael Peterson is a free man. This case is extremely controversial. There's a lot of people out there that think Michael Peterson got away with killing 2 women. But there's a lot of people out there that also think that Michael Peterson was innocent. There's also a lot of people out there that believe in the owl theory. Yes, there is a theory that an owl killed Kathleen Peterson. It seems far-fetched, but it's an interesting theory, and there is some evidence that backs it up. The theory is that while Kathleen was still outside but walking to her home, an owl dive-bombed her, attacked her head, which is, I guess, something that owls do. I'm no owl expert, but apparently the injuries on Kathleen's head are similar to an owl's talon marks. And to escape this owl, Kathleen just ran into her home. She's not paying attention, and that's how she fell down the stairs. When Kathleen was found, inside of her hand was a clump of her own hair. There were also pine needles and some owl feathers, which would make sense. If an owl was attacking your head, you would just be pulling and grabbing to try and get it off. It's an interesting theory, and you guys are gonna have to tell me what you think. Personally, my gut just tells me that Michael is guilty. I just can't get over the fact that someone tried to clean up bloody footprints in the house, and also this happened to another woman in Michael's past. And he was also seen running from her house the day that it happened. Today, Michael Peterson is a free man, and this case remains a mystery. I'm really looking forward to get all your guys' take on this case. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interesting conversation in the comments. You guys are always coming up with theories I would never put together in my head, so definitely leave all your thoughts, theories, questions in the comment section. And while you're there, let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow. Have you guys ever heard of Ethan Couch, the teenager that killed 4 people but got away with it because it was determined that he was just too rich to go to jail? It was June 15th, 2013, the day before Father's Day. 24-year-old Brianna Mitchell's car broke down on the side of the road right in front of the home of Eric and Holly Boyles. Their 21-year-old daughter Shelby was also at her parents' house. It was summer break, so she was there visiting them, especially since the next day was Father's Day. So all 3 of them came outside of their house to help Brianna with her broken down vehicle. And at the same time, youth pastor Brian Jennings was also driving down the same road, and he also pulled over to help. These were just good Samaritans just trying to help out a 24-year-old girl whose SUV had broken down when Ethan Couch came barreling down the road. So who is Ethan Couch? Ethan Couch is a spoiled, wealthy, entitled 16-year-old boy who had little to no parental supervision. That evening, Ethan and his friends decided to go to Walmart to steal beer. They had a huge party at Ethan's house. They're drinking beer, taking shots, playing games before Ethan decides that he's going to drive to a convenience store. Ethan and 7 other teenagers loaded into the back of Ethan's dad's truck. They're driving down the road. Ethan is speeding. He's swerving lanes. He's playing chicken with other cars in the road before swerving onto the shoulder and running over Brianna Mitchell, Pastor Brian Jennings, and Shelby and Holly Boyles. All 4 people did tragically pass away, and one of Ethan's friends was ejected from his vehicle and is now permanently paralyzed. He's unable to speak or move at all. And 16-year-old Ethan fled the scene. He just took off, but I guess he was so intoxicated he passed out drunk in a nearby ditch. It was determined that not only was Ethan using substances that night, but he was 3 times the legal limit when he crashed that car. Ethan was arrested. He was being charged as an adult, and they were seeking 20 years in prison. But get this, Ethan had some fancy lawyers that his rich parents paid for, and their defense strategy was that Ethan was suffering from affluenza, meaning that he was too rich to know right from wrong, so he could not be held responsible for this. And it worked. It worked, guys. Talk about rich white privilege, right? Ethan got away with killing 4 people and paralyzing someone for the rest of their lives and walked away with only probation. And he had to spend a teeny bit of time in a fancy, really fancy, nice rehab center that, guess what, was paid for by taxpayers' money, meaning that you paid for that. And after being released from rehab, Ethan went right back to partying. Ethan went to little house parties with his little high school friends, and videos of him partying were posted on social media, which was a huge violation of his probation. So Ethan knew that he was going to get in a lot of trouble. So guess what Ethan did? Just talk about great parenting, right? Ethan convinced his mom to flee the country to Mexico, where Ethan continued to party. He was only found and arrested after he placed a pizza delivery order from his cell phone, because I guess he's also too rich and too dumb to know that they could track his cell phone if you flee the country. After violating his probation and also fleeing the country, Ethan Couch was only sentenced to serve 2 years in prison before being released. So Ethan Couch is free right now. Spent 2 years in prison for killing 4 people, permanently paralyzing someone, violating his probation, and fleeing the country. It's also worth noting that affluenza is not something that is recognized as a real condition or a real defense strategy. This was just made up, and it's really upsetting because it now sets a precedent that other people will be able to use this in the future. Please let me know all your thoughts on this case in the comments, you guys, and I'm sure you guys' opinions are going to be really strong, and trust me, I'm right there with you. This is extremely frustrating. While you're in the comments, please tell me what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you tomorrow. I call this man the toy box killer, and he might be one of the most terrifying men I ever had the misfortune of reading about. And now you're gonna know all about him too. David Parker Ray had been having dark fantasies of hurting women and just doing the most terrible things to them as young as when he was only 9 years old. He is a textbook sadist, which makes him one of the most terrifying people out there, because when he hurt women, he did it because he enjoyed it. Like, deeply enjoyed it. David Parker Ray is known as the toy box killer because he had this trailer in his backyard that he called the toy box, that he filled with everything and anything that could cause the most unspeakable pain to his victims. And he spent like over $100,000 on the items inside of his toy box, so there were a lot of things in there. He would kidnap young women to keep in his toy box, and then once they were in his toy box, he would play them a tape recording where he would explain in graphic detail everything that he planned to do to them. Is that not the most terrifying thing you've ever heard? And this tape recording is online if you want to go hear it, but do it at your own risk because it is deeply disturbing. In his toy box, he also had a chair, like a chair that you would find at the lady doctor. And then he would chain his victims to the chair. He would essay them and then hurt them in the most unspeakable ways possible. David Parker Ray would also film everything he did to these women, and then he would sell the videos to I don't know who, but scary people, and he would sell them for a lot of money. David Parker Ray did not act alone. He actually had a lot of accomplices, including his own daughter. David's daughter, Jessie, was always very close to her father, almost too close. Like, a lot of people actually think that her father fathered her child, and Jessie was trained from a very young age to be like her father's assistant, and she would help lure women to be her father's victims, including her own friends. And once David decided that he was done with the women that he had in captivity, he would do one of three things to them. He would either kill them, or he would sell them across the Mexico border into human trafficking, or he would even let them go. He would let them go on a remote country back road, and they would never, come forward or turn him in the police because he kept them so heavily sedated on a bunch of substances that they would not even remember a single thing. Some of his victims that he did let go ended up coming forward years later after the memories came back years later. So chances are that there's probably a lot of women out there that don't even remember that they were victims of this guy. David Parker Ray was really living a double life. He lived in this really, really small town where everyone knew each other. Everyone thought that he was a normal, good guy, a good father, but they had no idea how evil their neighbor really was. David has also been described as kind of a ladies' man, if you can even believe that, because he always had some pretty young girlfriend. He even had this girlfriend, Cindy, who was also helping him with his toy box. I'm not sure how this man was able to convince so many people to help him out, because even when his daughter Jessie got a boyfriend, he was able to convince the boyfriend to also help with the toy box and help kidnap and kill these victims. So it was just these four people committing the most evil crimes imaginable. And all of this only ever came to light in March of 1999 when David and his girlfriend kidnapped a 22-year-old girl named Cynthia. They had her in captivity for 3 entire days, doing the worst things possible to her, when David's girlfriend accidentally left the keys to her restraints in her reach while David was at work. She grabbed the house phone and tried to call 911, but before she could say anything to the person on the other phone, David's girlfriend came back in, found her, caught her, and then the two started fighting. Luckily, she was able to escape, and she runs to the first house that she can find. She's banging on the door, she's screaming that she's been held captive, and Cynthia's not wearing anything. She's wearing nothing but a dog collar and a bunch of chains. The neighbor calls 911, but because Cynthia has been on all these substances, she can't really remember much. But luckily, she did make that 911 call when she first escaped. So they were able to track where that 911 call was made from and track it right back to David Parker Ray's house. And these small town police officers had no idea what they were walking into when they stepped into David's toy box. They find hundreds of videos of what David did to his victims, because remember, he filmed it all, but David tried to say, hey, everything in the videos is consensual, it's just acting. But his 3 accomplices, his girlfriend, his daughter, and his daughter's boyfriend, they all turn on him and they confess everything. They tell the police everything in graphic detail. They told the police that David would kill at least one girl every single year for 40 years, you guys. And that David had this boat and he would take it to this nearby lake that had these ginormous catfish, you guys. And these catfish would eat anything. And that's how David would dispose of his victims. But unfortunately, because of this, they were not able to find a single one of David's victims' bodies. Even though it's believed that David killed at least 60 women, but probably more, and they had videotapes of him doing it, they were not able to charge him with a single one. For the crimes that they were able to find concrete evidence of, they were able to sentence David Parker Ray to 224 years in prison. But get this, after spending 1 day in prison, David Parker Ray had a heart attack and died. So he never even had to serve a prison sentence for all these terrible crimes that he committed. His 3 accomplices, his girlfriend Cindy, his daughter Jessie, and her boyfriend Roy, all spent only a couple years in prison before being released, so they're all out free somewhere in the world right now today. This is one of those terrible cases where you feel like there was no justice that was really gotten and there's no closure because of it, and it's just despicable. This man is so scary, and the fact that there's people like that out there gives me the chills. Please let me know all your guys' thoughts in the comments, and while you're there, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow. At one point, this girl was the youngest woman on death row. This is a case of one of the messiest love triangles I've ever heard of, and it feels like something out of a TV show. This is Amelia Carr from Florida. She had a really rough childhood. Her father and her grandfather both began to SA her when she was only 4 years old. And when the authorities were made aware of this, her father, not her grandfather, only her father, was given a court-ordered program to fix him, no jail time, and then was right back in the home where the abuse continued. It only ever ended when Amelia was 15 years old, so over 10 years of suffering through this abuse, when she told someone at the school what was happening at home. So her father was arrested and placed in jail, and behind bars, her father tried to hire a hitman to kill his own daughter because she turned him in. But that hitman was actually a undercover police officer. And for all of this, the over 10 years of essaying his own daughter and then trying to hire a hitman against her, he was only given 4 years in prison. Amelia had a lot of trauma and complex emotions after this. There was shame, there was guilt. She was always this really brilliant child. She had an extremely high IQ. She was an honor roll student, but she dropped out of high school. She ran away from home. She got pregnant with her first child when she was only 17 years old. And then by the time she was 21 years old, she was a single mother of 3 children. And now this is where that messy love triangle I told you about comes into play. So Amelia was in an on-again, off-again relationship with her youngest child's father, a guy named Jamie. And Jamie had a new best friend, a guy who had just moved to Florida named Josh. Josh had just moved to Florida with his long-term girlfriend, his high school sweetheart named Heather. Josh and Heather had a child together. The relationship was really good. They were like this little family until Josh got addicted to a substance called crystal. You know, crystal. His personality completely changed. So they moved to Florida for a fresh new start, but shortly after they moved to Florida, Heather got pregnant again. Well, Josh was not happy about this, so he actually started cheating on his pregnant girlfriend with his best friend Jamie's girlfriend, Amelia. You see how this starts to get messy? It gets worse. Well, Heather found out that Josh was cheating on her with Amelia, and so began this terrible cycle where Josh and Heather would break up, so he would go be with Amelia, and then he would leave Amelia to go back to Heather, and then Heather and Josh would break up again, so he would go date Amelia, he would leave her to be with Heather, and so on and so forth, and this would continue for over 2 years. Allegedly, at one point, they were even in a throuple. Well, at some point, Heather has enough of this headache, so she dumps Josh. She starts dating a new guy. He's a good guy. She's in a healthy, stable relationship for once, but Josh cannot let her go. Josh begins stalking Heather. He's threatening her and her new boyfriend, but the entire time that Josh is harassing his ex-girlfriend Heather, he's dating Amelia. He even gets Amelia pregnant and proposes to her. So they're fiancés, but he's still stalking and harassing his ex-girlfriend Heather. And because toxic relationships can be so difficult to break out of, Heather decides that she wants Josh back. So Josh leaves Amelia, the woman that he's just proposed to, who was pregnant with his child, to get back together with Heather. And within a few days, he proposes to Heather with the same ring that he used to propose to Amelia. And within 1 month, Josh and Heather were married. But it was not happily ever after for Josh and Heather now. Oh, no, because only 10 days into their marriage, Josh and Heather got into a fight, and Josh threatened to kill Heather, which landed him in jail. And within a few days of Josh going to jail, Heather had a new boyfriend, and I bet you'll never guess who it is. It was Jamie. You remember Jamie? It was Josh's best friend and Amelia's baby daddy. And with Josh behind bars, Amelia starts visiting him, and they rekindle their relationship. And Amelia is so mad at Heather for 1, sending Josh to prison, and 2, because Heather was dating her ex-boyfriend. I wonder if Amelia even saw the irony in that. So not only is Amelia threatening Heather to drop the charges against Josh, but she also starts going around town offering anyone $500 to kill Heather. Like father, like daughter, right? Because as you remember, Amelia's father tried to hire somebody to kill her. Well, Amelia scared Heather, so much in fact that Heather dropped the charges against Josh and Josh was released from jail. And within 9 days of Josh being released from jail, Heather Strong went missing. Well, the police, they question Amelia and they question Josh and they question them separately. And Josh actually cracks. He tells them that he lured Heather to meet him, but Amelia was secretly there. The two of them attacked Heather. They tied her to a chair where they forced her to sign over custody of their children to him. And then with duct tape over Heather's mouth, Amelia calmly just walks over to her and holds her nose so she couldn't breathe. That's so sinister. And she did it so calmly, and that's just such a twisted way to end somebody's life. And Amelia killed Heather while she's still pregnant with Josh's child, because this is how fast all of this happened. Amelia wasn't as easy to crack as Josh because, as you remember, Amelia has an extremely high IQ. She's a lot smarter than Josh. She does not fall for like the interrogation tactics that they do. So they actually only got a confession out of Amelia because they secretly recorded a conversation that she was having with one of her friends. While awaiting her trial, Amelia gave birth to her and Josh's child, which was put up for adoption, and then her 3 other children and Heather and Josh's 2 children were put into the foster system. And it actually is so sad and breaks my heart how many children were in the middle of this terrible mess. Amelia and Josh had 2 separate trials, and Amelia was found guilty and sentenced to death row, and Josh was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for essentially the same crime, which has been very controversial, but you guys have to let me know what you think about that. To this day, Amelia continues to claim that she is actually 100% innocent and this was all Josh. And in 2017, her sentence was actually switched to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This case was absolutely crazy, and I have a lot I want to say at the end here. For one, I hope I don't see any comments of people victim blaming Heather because she continued to stay with Josh and go back to him. As someone that was in a toxic relationship for a really, really long time, I know how hard it is to like finally get out of it. And I'm sure a lot of people watching it can sympathize and empathize with Heather in this situation. If you or someone you know are in a toxic relationship and you are scared, just know that you are not alone and there are a lot of resources out there that can help you. Heather Strong is not responsible for what happened to her. It is not her fault. There's only 2 people that are to blame to what happened to Heather, and they are exactly where they need to be. I know this was a really complicated case to follow, but you guys are always telling me that I'm really good at being able to make cases make sense for you guys to follow. So I hope you felt that way in this case, because Heather Strong's story was something I really wanted to talk about today, and also about like domestic violence and toxic relationships. If you guys listened to Heather Strong's story, thank you guys so much for staying here because I know it was a long video. Let me know all your guys' thoughts in the comments, and while you're there, please tell me what case you want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.